The observation deck of Research Station Parallax offered an unobstructed view of the third planet from Sul, though calling it a view was generous. What hung before the assembled academics was less a world and more a cosmic middle finger, a roiling sphere of atmospheric violence wrapped around a core that seemed personally offended by the concept of stability. "Colleagues," Dr. Kethvar began, his chitinous limbs clicking against the podium in what his species considered confident posturing, "I present to you the most preposterous thesis of my career." Commander Zilthan of the Hegemony Defense Corps shifted her bulk in the reinforced chair, her 6 eyes narrowing in synchronized skepticism. "Kethvar, your last breakthrough involved trying to weaponize flowering plants. This had better not involve botany. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story." "Nothing so mundane," Kethvar replied, gesturing toward the planet below. "I propose we recruit the inhabitants of that particular hellscape." The silence that followed could have been measured with geological instruments. Professor Nomhai, the station's lead xenopsychologist, was the first to break it. "The mammals? The bipedal ones who built cities on fault lines and vacation spots inside volcanic calderas? Those would be the ones." "Kethvar," Zilthan rumbled, "I've read the initial surveys. Their planet actively tries to murder them. Daily. The weather patterns alone violate 17 safety protocols." "Precisely my point." Dr. Yextel, whose species had evolved in the galaxy's most stable star system, raised what might charitably be called a hand. "For the sake of argument, let's assume you haven't suffered a complete neurological breakdown. What exactly are you suggesting?" Kethvar activated the holographic display, and suddenly the room was filled with 3-dimensional representations of Earth's more enthusiastic attempts at homicide. Hurricanes that could power small civilizations. Earthquakes that rearranged geography as a hobby. Volcanoes that treated atmospheric composition like a personal suggestion. "The hegemony has spent 3 centuries searching for suitable military auxiliaries," he continued. "We've tested species from low-gravity worlds, high-radiation environments, extreme temperature zones, all failures. Too specialized, too fragile, too dependent on specific conditions. And your solution is to recruit from a planet that makes our maximum security detention facilities look like luxury resorts." Nomhai's translator struggled with the sarcasm. "Think about it logically. We've been approaching this backwards." Kethvar manipulated the display, showing Earth's atmospheric composition. 21% oxygen. Do you understand what that means?" Zilthan's translator made a sound like grinding metal. "It means they live in a constant state of oxidative stress." "They breathe rocket fuel," Yextel whispered, his respiratory apparatus cycling rapidly. "And that's just the air," Kethvar said clearly, enjoying himself. "The gravity is nearly 10 meters per second squared. Their water contains dissolved minerals that would poison most civilized species. The magnetic field fluctuates enough to disrupt sensitive electronics, and somehow, impossibly, they thrive." Commander Zilthan leaned forward, her massive frame causing the deck plating to creak. "Thrive is a strong word for a species that hasn't achieved faster-than-light travel. Have they needed to? They're too busy conquering their own planet." Kethvar switched to a compilation of human engineering projects. "They've built structures that withstand seismic events that would level our cities. They've created vehicles that function in temperatures that would flash freeze our best military hardware. They've developed medical techniques to repair damage that we would consider categorically fatal." "This is all very impressive in an insane sort of way," Nomhai interjected. "But what makes you think they'd be useful as soldiers?" Kethvar's mandibles curved in what his species used instead of smiling. Because every single day of their existence is combat training against their own environment. The display shifted to show human population centers, cities built in floodplains, settlements perched on cliffsides, agricultural centers in regions where the soil periodically caught fire. Look at their settlement patterns, he continued. They don't avoid danger zones, they colonize them. They don't build around natural disasters, they build through them. They've turned environmental hostility into a competitive advantage. Yextel's optical sensors dilated with what might have been horror. You're saying they've militarized their entire evolutionary process. I'm saying their entire evolutionary process was already military. We just didn't recognize it. Zilthon stood, her bulk casting shadows across the display. Even if you're correct about their resilience, what makes you think they'd work with us? The quarantine protocols exist for a reason. They're classified as a developing civilization. Are they? Kethvar brought up a new data set. Their mathematics are elegant. Their engineering is brutally practical. Their problem-solving approaches are... He paused, searching for the right word. Unconventional. You mean insane, Numhai said flatly. I mean effective. When was the last time any hegemony species solved a critical infrastructure problem by hitting it with a hammer? That's not a valid engineering methodology. Tell that to their success rates. Commander Zilthon studied the planet below, her expression unreadable. The Defense Corps has been exploring alternatives. Our recent conflicts have shown certain limitations in conventional approaches. You mean we've been losing, Yextel said. I mean we've been learning the value of adaptability. Zilthon's tone suggested the conversation was veering into classified territory. If Kethvar's assessment has merit, we might consider limited contact. Limited contact with a species that lives on a planet where the weather patterns have been classified as a weapon of mass destruction? Nomhe's incredulity was universal, regardless of translation. The preliminary studies are already approved, Kethvar said quietly. 3 volunteers, cultural exchange program, completely voluntary. The silence returned, heavier this time. Professor Nomhai finally spoke. You want to bring them here, to this station, where we study the most dangerous phenomena in local space. Where better to test their capabilities? Zilthon's laugh sounded like tectonic plates settling. This should be educational. When do they arrive? Kethvar checked his chronometer. Approximately 6 standard hours. They're already in transit? Yextel's voice climbed several octaves. I may have been optimistic about the approval process. Commander Zilthon studied the toxic blue marble hanging in the void beyond the observation deck. Somewhere down there, 3 members of a species that had apparently spent millennia training for galactic warfare, without realizing it, were preparing to demonstrate whether theoretical xenobiology matched practical reality. Well, she said finally, this should either revolutionize military recruitment or provide excellent data for the next symposium on why theoretical scientists shouldn't be allowed to make policy decisions. Kethvar's mandibles twitched with what might have been confidence or impending nervous breakdown. I prefer to think of it as expanding our definition of what constitutes survival training. Outside the observation deck, Earth continued its rotation, blissfully unaware that 3 of its inhabitants were about to become the galaxy's most unusual job interview. The docking bay's atmospheric processors worked overtime as the human transport sealed its final connections. Through the reinforced viewing port, Station Parallax's assembled research team watched 3 figures emerge from what the hegemony had classified as a primitive chemical propulsion vessel. Though admittedly, it had survived a journey that would have challenged some of their own military craft. Captain Maria Torres stepped onto the deck first, her gait suggesting someone accustomed to gravity that actually meant business. She wore what appeared to be a standard-issue uniform, though Dr. Kethavar noted it bore scorch marks that seemed decorative rather than concerning to its wearer. "Artificial atmosphere feels a bit thin," Torres commented to her companions, pulling off her helmet with the casual indifference of someone removing a hat. "Reminds me of Denver," engineer Luis Vasquez followed, carrying what looked like a toolbox held together with optimism and metallic tape. "Better than that station we visited near Titan. That place barely had enough oxygen to keep a candle burning." "Speaking of which," Dr. Amara Okafor said, consulting a handheld device that was definitely not hegemony technology. "The electromagnetic readings here are fascinating. It's like they're running their power grid through a series of controlled disasters." Commander Zilthan's communication system crackled to life. "Dr. Kethavar, are you monitoring this?" "Every word. Notice how they're already adapting to our environmental parameters without complaint." "They think our life support system is quaint," Nomhai observed. "That's unsettling." The welcoming committee approached with the formal caution reserved for potentially explosive situations. Protocol demanded a ceremonial greeting, though none of them were quite sure how to ceremonially greet a species that apparently treated their daily commute as survival training. "Welcome to Research Station Parallax," Zilthan began, her translator working overtime to render her formal tone appropriately. "I am Commander—" "Wow, you're huge," Vasquez interrupted with the sort of genuine enthusiasm usually reserved for interesting machinery. "Is that natural body armor or ceremonial plating?" Zilthan blinked all 6 eyes in sequence. "Natural. My species evolved on a world with significant kinetic hazards." "Like meteor showers? Like predators the size of your aircraft?" "Oh, cool. We had those too. Called them dinosaurs. They didn't work out, but the fossil fuels have been handy." Dr. Okafor stepped forward, apparently designated as the group's diplomat. "Thank you for hosting us, Commander. We're excited to participate in this cultural exchange." "The pleasure is mutual," Zilthan replied, though her tone suggested she was reserving judgment on the pleasure part. "Dr. Kethavar will be conducting your orientation." Kethavar's approach was less ceremonial and more scientific. He moved like someone studying particularly interesting specimens. "If you'll follow me, we've prepared a series of assessments to help us understand your capabilities." "Assessments?" Torres asked. "Like tests?" "More like compatibility evaluations." Vasquez grinned. "Oh, like when NASA puts you in the centrifuge to see if you throw up. I love those." The first evaluation chamber had been designed to simulate what hegemony scientists considered moderately challenging environmental conditions. Temperature fluctuations, reduced atmospheric pressure, elevated radiation levels. Nothing that would cause permanent damage, but enough to stress-test non-adapted physiology. "The parameters will increase gradually," Kethavar explained through the observation window. "Please indicate immediately if you experience discomfort." "Define discomfort," Torres said, already removing her outer jacket as the temperature began climbing toward what most species would consider uninhabitable. "Difficulty breathing, elevated heart rate, impaired cognitive function." "So like Tuesday morning staff meetings," Vasquez said. "Got it." The environmental systems pushed harder. Atmospheric pressure dropped to levels that should have triggered hypoxia. The temperature spiked toward ranges that would shut down most biological processes. Radiation levels climbed into zones marked clearly as hazardous in 17 different languages. The humans continued chatting. "Luis, remember that job site in Phoenix last summer?" Torres asked, stretching casually as the temperature hit 55 degrees Celsius. "With the broken air conditioning?" "Yeah, this reminds me of lunch break that day." "Except less humid," Okafor added. checking her readings with clinical interest. Though the radiation signature is interesting, it's got a similar spectrum to what we get at altitude during solar storms. In the observation chamber, several alien scientists were making rapid notes, their writing implements smoking from overuse. Are they comfortable? Yextel asked, his voice conveying the sort of bewilderment usually reserved for impossible mathematical proofs. They're having a conversation about recreational activities, Nomhai reported, his translation matrix struggling with concepts like weekend camping and fun run through Death Valley. Kethvar increased the parameters again. The chamber now approximated conditions that would hospitalize most spacefaring species within minutes. "Oh, this is nice," Okafor said. "It's like that conference in Johannesburg, except the ventilation actually works." "Should we mention that our normal atmospheric pressure is about twice what they're running here?" Vasquez asked, adjusting his tool belt with the air of someone settling in for a comfortable wait. "Nah, they probably know what they're doing," Torres replied. "Besides, this is fun. When do we get to the actual tests?" Commander Zilthan's comm system began making distressed electronic sounds. "Kethvar, they think this is preliminary calibration." "I was afraid of that." The second chamber featured what the research team had designated extreme kinetic challenges. Basically, things falling from various heights at various speeds while the subject attempted to navigate through the chaos. It had been designed to test reflexes, spatial awareness, and the ability to function under immediate physical threat. Torres entered the chamber with the casual confidence of someone visiting a familiar gymnasium. "Oh, obstacle course. Haven't done one of these since basic training." The first projectile launched, a meter-wide synthetic boulder traveling at speeds calculated to provide challenge without actual fatality. Torres sidestepped it with the sort of fluid motion that suggested this was muscle memory rather than conscious thought. "Nice weight distribution on that one," she called out, as 3 more projectiles converged on her position. She moved through them like water finding its own level, never seeming to hurry, but somehow always exactly where the projectiles weren't. "Remind me to update the physics models," Vasquez said to Okafor through the comm system. "Their movement predictions are about 2 standard deviations off." "It's like they're not calculating trajectory so much as intuiting it," Okafor replied, making notes on her device. "Probably evolutionary adaptation to high kinetic environments." The chamber's difficulty increased exponentially. Projectiles began firing in patterns that should have required superhuman computation to navigate. The environmental hazards activated: electrified surfaces, unstable flooring, atmospheric irritants. Torres navigated it all with the sort of practiced ease that suggested her childhood playground equipment had been designed by sadists with advanced degrees in physics. "Time," Kethvar called, though he wasn't entirely sure why. The human hadn't shown any signs of fatigue, distress, or concern. She'd seemed, if anything, mildly disappointed when the sequence ended. "That was fun," Torres said, emerging from the chamber without apparent injury or elevated respiration. "Kind of reminds me of parkour, except with better safety protocols." "Safety protocols?" Zilthan's translation matrix nearly failed. "Yeah, you made sure nothing was actually trying to kill me. Very considerate." In the observation deck, the assembled xenobiologists stared at their readouts with the expression of people whose fundamental assumptions about physics had just been personally insulted by reality. "How?" Nomhai asked slowly. "Do they define actually dangerous?" The answer came 16 hours later when Station Parallax's proximity alarms began screaming with the sort of electronic panic usually reserved for imminent structural failure. The solar storm had emerged from behind the local star's corona, like a cosmic predator, its electromagnetic teeth bared and ready to strip away anything resembling delicate technology. "All personnel to emergency stations," Commander Zilthan's voice echoed through the corridors with military precision. "Full radiation protocol in effect. This is not a drill." The station's crew moved with practiced efficiency toward their designated safe zones, reinforced compartments deep within the station's core, surrounded by enough shielding to protect them from the worst of the stellar tantrum, currently racing toward their position. Captain Torres found herself in Corridor 7 when the lights flickered and died, emergency illumination casting everything in the sort of red glow that made even routine maintenance look apocalyptic. She was joined moments later by Vasquez and Okafor, who appeared from side passages with the unhurried pace of people accustomed to infrastructure, having personal vendettas. "Power grids having issues," Okafor observed, consulting her handheld device. "Looks like their primary shielding is compromised. Electromagnetic cascade failure in the outer ring." "Classic solar storm damage," Vasquez nodded, shouldering his improvised toolkit. "Bet they're losing atmospheric integrity in the outer sections." A hegemony technician scurried past them toward the safe zone, his breathing apparatus cycling rapidly with what humans might recognize as hyperventilation. He paused, staring at the three figures standing calmly in a corridor that was rapidly becoming uninhabitable by galactic standards. "Emergency protocols," he gasped through his translator. "Radiation exposure imminent." "Thanks for the heads up," Torres said pleasantly. "We'll be along in a minute." The technician's optical sensors dilated with incomprehension before he continued his desperate flight toward safety. "Think we should lend a hand?" Vasquez asked, studying the sparking power conduits with professional interest. "Looks like they've got some serious electrical fire starting up in the distribution nodes." "Probably," Torres agreed, "though we should check if they want help first. Some species get touchy about unsolicited emergency assistance." Dr. Kethavar's voice crackled through the failing communication system. "Human guests, please proceed immediately to Safe Zone Delta. Current radiation levels in your section are approaching lethal parameters." "Define lethal," Okafor called back, making notes on the electromagnetic readings. "Because these levels are actually pretty mild compared to what we get during Aurora season back home." Static filled the channel for several moments. "Did she just say the deadly radiation reminds her of a seasonal light show?" came Nomhai's voice, faint but distinctly incredulous. "I think she did," Kethavar replied. "Humans, please clarify your current status." "We're fine," Torres said, stepping over a power coupling that was throwing sparks in patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't symptomatic of imminent system failure. "Actually, Luis thinks he knows what's wrong with your primary distribution hub." "The coupling array is over-tensioned," Vasquez added, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd diagnosed similar problems in environments where mistakes meant death rather than paperwork. "You've got a harmonic resonance building up in the tertiary circuits. Give it another 20 minutes and your whole power grid's going to cascade into failure." "That's remarkably accurate," came another voice, one of the station's senior engineers. "How could you possibly know that without accessing our diagnostic systems?" "Sound," Okafor explained. "The frequency patterns from your electrical systems are shifting into unstable harmonics. It's the same principle as monitoring seismic activity before volcanic eruptions." "Your power grid sounds like Mount Vesuvius on a bad day," Vasquez added helpfully. Commander Zilthan's voice cut through the technical discussion with military directness. "Even if your assessment is correct, the outer sections are currently experiencing Class 5 radiation exposure. No one can access the distribution hub until the storm passes." "Class 5? Torres asked. "What's that in sieverts?" A pause while someone presumably did calculations. "Approximately 200 per marceau. Hour." "Oh, that's not too bad," Torres said. "We've worked in worse. Remember that cleanup job near Chernobyl, Louis? Different kind of radiation, but yeah, similar exposure rates. We've got about 4 hours before we need to start worrying about cellular damage. In Safe Zone Delta, the assembled alien crew listened to this exchange with the sort of fascinated horror usually reserved for watching someone juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle through a minefield. They're discussing lethal radiation exposure like overtime pay rates, Nomhai whispered. Because to them, it basically is, Kethavar replied, his scientific excitement warring with species-appropriate terror. The humans, meanwhile, had already begun moving toward the damaged sections. Their conversation carried clearly through the comm system as they navigated corridors that were rapidly becoming uninhabitable by any reasonable definition. Grab those emergency patches from Storage Bay 3, Torres instructed. I'll jury-rig something for the atmospheric breach in Section 7. What about tools? Vasquez asked. There's probably something useful in the maintenance lockers. Worst case, we improvise. With what? I don't know. Whatever's lying around. We fixed that orbital platform near Mars with part of a breakfast tray and some medical tubing. That was a good day, Okafor agreed. Though this electromagnetic signature is actually more interesting. It's like working inside an aurora. Their casual competence became even more surreal as they began actually repairing the station's critical systems. Through external sensors, the command crew watched 3 figures moving through sections of the station that should have been empty tombs, their movements efficient and unstressed. They're rewiring the primary coupling matrix, the station's chief engineer reported, his voice tight with professional amazement. Using, is that a belt buckle? And part of the emergency lighting system, another technician added. That's either brilliant improvisation or spectacular vandalism. It's working, came a third voice. Power levels are stabilizing. Harmonic resonance is dropping back into acceptable parameters. The humans' voices provided running commentary on their work, treating the repair of critical life support systems during a radiation storm as roughly equivalent to routine home maintenance. Pass me that conduit wrench, Amara. This isn't a conduit wrench. It's some kind of ceremonial eating utensil. Close enough. The threading's similar. Are they fixing our most advanced technological systems with cutlery? Zilthon asked. Appears to be, Kethavar confirmed, and doing it more efficiently than our trained specialists would under optimal conditions. The storm passed 3 hours later, its electromagnetic fury spent against the station's battered but functional shielding. When the all-clear sounded, the emergency teams emerged from their safe zones to find the outer sections not only intact, but somehow more stable than they'd been before the crisis. The 3 humans were discovered in what had been the station's most damaged section, sitting around an improvised table made from a damaged bulkhead, sharing what appeared to be emergency rations, heated over a jury-rigged thermal unit constructed from spare parts and creative engineering. Oh, hey, Torres said, as the search teams found them. We saved some dinner if anyone's hungry. Luis figured out how to make your nutrient paste taste like actual food. The trick is controlled electromagnetic heating, Vasquez explained. Same principle as microwave cooking, except we built the microwave out of spare sensor equipment. Dr. Okafor looked up from her handheld device, which was now displaying readings that made the station's senior scientists exchange worried glances. Fascinating place you've got here, she said. The radiation levels during that storm were actually perfect for some spectroscopy work I've been meaning to catch up on. Got some great data on exotic particle interactions. Commander Zilthon stared at the 3 humans with the expression of someone whose understanding of the universe had just been quietly but thoroughly demolished. You used a Class 5 radiation event as an opportunity for scientific research, she said slowly. Well, the equipment was already ionized, Okafor replied. Seemed wasteful not to take advantage of it. The debriefing session that followed would later be classified at levels requiring security clearances that didn't technically exist yet. Commander Zilth-An had cleared the main conference room of all but essential personnel, though she was beginning to question what constituted essential when dealing with a species that apparently moonlighted as natural disasters. "Let me understand this correctly," she began, her multiple eyes focusing on the three humans with the intensity of targeting systems. "During a stellar radiation event that should have killed you in minutes, you repaired our critical infrastructure using improvised tools, enhanced our system efficiency beyond original specifications, and conducted independent research." "Pretty much," Torres confirmed, though calling it research is generous. "Amara just likes taking measurements." "It's a hobby," Okafor explained, "like birdwatching, except with exotic particles." Dr. Kethvar leaned forward across the conference table, his scientific curiosity warring with what might have been existential dread. "The modifications you made to our power distribution system, our engineers are calling them impossible." "Not impossible," Vasquez corrected. "Just non-standard. Your systems are over-engineered for safety, which is admirable, but it makes them rigid. A little creative bypassing, and you can improve efficiency by about 30%. "Creative bypassing," Numhai repeated, his translator struggling with what was apparently a technical term that had no equivalent in civilized engineering. "You mean sabotage?" "We mean optimization," Torres said, "though I guess the line gets blurry when you're working with unfamiliar tech under time pressure." What followed was the sort of technical discussion that would have fascinated engineering students and terrified safety inspectors across 17 star systems. The humans described their repairs with the casual precision of craftsmen discussing a particularly interesting project, while the alien engineers took notes with the desperate intensity of people trying to reverse engineer miracles. "The harmonic resonance issue," the station's chief engineer interjected. "Our computer models predicted it would require a complete system rebuild to resolve." "Your computer models were probably right," Vasquez agreed, "for a conventional repair. But when you're working with ionized components during an electromagnetic storm, the rules change. The radiation actually helps stabilize the quantum fluctuations in the coupling matrix." "That's not how physics works," Yextel protested weakly. "It's exactly how physics works," Okafor said. "You just don't usually get to observe it because most species avoid the conditions necessary for direct manipulation of quantum-scale electromagnetic interactions. Most species avoid those conditions because they're lethal." "Well, yes. That too." Commander Zilthan felt a familiar sensation that she'd learned to associate with paradigm shifts, of the sort that left military strategists reevaluating everything they thought they knew about warfare. "Dr. Kethvar, I believe we need to discuss classification levels." Before Kethvar could respond, the conference room's communication system activated with an incoming priority signal. The holographic display materialized to show a figure that made everyone except the humans straighten with recognition. Admiral Kesseran of the Hegemony Strategic Command, whose species had evolved from pack hunters and retained the predatory awareness that made them exceptional military leaders. "Commander Zilthan," the Admiral began, "I understand you've been conducting unauthorized recruitment exercises." "Sir, the research parameters were approved through proper channels." "I'm not concerned with the research," Kesseran interrupted. "I'm concerned with the results. Specifically, I'm concerned with the fact that 3 members of the species you've been studying just solved a critical infrastructure problem that our best engineers have been working on for 6 months. The silence that followed carried the weight of classified implications. Torres looked between the aliens with the expression of someone slowly realizing they might have stumbled into something more complex than a cultural exchange program. "When you say critical infrastructure?" "The orbital defense platforms around Kepler 442b, Admiral Kesseran said bluntly. 17 billion inhabitants. under siege by hegemony enemies for the past year. The main power distribution nodes have been failing faster than we can replace them due to harmonics issues caused by enemy electromagnetic weapons. Oh, Okafor said quietly. That's significantly more serious than a research station. Vasquez was already pulling out his improvised tools. Same basic problem as here, though, just scaled up. You'd need to modify the coupling matrices to compensate for the induced resonance patterns, maybe add some distributed buffering to smooth out the load fluctuations. Luis, Torres said carefully, I think we should probably ask some questions before we start volunteering engineering advice for military operations. Admiral Kesran's expression suggested someone recalculating strategic priorities in real time. Dr. Kethavar, are these individuals representative of their species' technical capabilities? That's difficult to assess, sir. They appear to consider advanced problem-solving under extreme conditions as routine professional development. And their cultural attitudes toward cooperation with other species? The three humans exchanged glances that suggested rapid, non-verbal communication protocols. Depends on the cooperation, Torres said finally. Are we talking about helping fix broken infrastructure, or are we talking about something that's going to involve shooting at people? Infrastructure maintenance, Admiral Kesran replied. Though in contested space, the distinction can become academic. Contested by whom? Okafor asked. What followed was a briefing that would have required security clearances under normal circumstances, but the circumstances had stopped being normal approximately 4 hours ago, when 3 representatives of a supposedly primitive species had casually revolutionized hegemony engineering doctrine. The hegemony, it turned out, was locked in a slow-motion conflict with what they diplomatically termed ideological opponents. Species who disagreed with the concept of centralized galactic governance and had developed remarkably effective ways of expressing their disagreement through systematic infrastructure sabotage. Conventional warfare is impractical when your opponents specialize in making critical systems fail at precisely the wrong moment, Admiral Kesran explained. We need engineers who can work under fire, improvise solutions with limited resources, and maintain complex systems in hostile environments. So, Tuesday for us, Vasquez said, except with aliens shooting at us instead of just environmental hazards trying to kill us. The compensation would be substantial, Kesran continued. Full citizenship, access to hegemony technology, preferred trading status for your homeworld. Our homeworld doesn't know we're here, Torres pointed out. That could be arranged. The implications hung in the recycled air like an unexploded ordnance. The humans were being offered what amounted to first contact on behalf of their entire species, with the minor detail that it would involve becoming the hegemony's emergency repair service for situations too dangerous for civilized species to handle. Can we think about it? Torres asked. Of course, though I should mention that your preliminary assessments have already been distributed to relevant department heads. You may receive additional consultation requests. How many additional requests? Okafor inquired with the wariness of someone sensing scope creep. Admiral Kesran consulted his display. Currently, 47 star systems with critical infrastructure failures, 12 orbital habitats with life support issues, and approximately 200 smaller installations reporting various levels of impossible engineering problems. The humans stared at him with the gradual comprehension of people realizing they'd accidentally applied for a job that had no upper limit on overtime requirements. Well, Torres said finally, at least the work sounds interesting. Commander Zilth-An watched the 3 representatives of humanity consider an offer that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in local space, treating it with the same casual competence they'd applied to everything else since their arrival. Outside the conference room windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, blissfully unaware that the galaxy's most persistent engineering problems were about to meet a species that had spent millennia treating existential threats as professional development opportunities. And in the back of her mind, Zilthan found herself wondering if the hegemony had just recruited 3 exceptional individuals, or if they'd accidentally discovered that an entire world full of humans had been quietly preparing to become the galaxy's most indispensable troubleshooters.